a marketing consultant I work with in town. He's got a great saying: 80% out the door is better than 100% in the drawer.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast called Blitzscale. I'm recording now, just so you know.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's done by Reid Hoffman, and it's absolutely brilliant. And he spends a lot of the time talking about the kind of what you just said, really, like getting it ready. As long as it's not illegal or it's too detrimental to your business or your idea, then run with it, put it out there, and you'll kind of figure it out. If you spend so long working on something and bringing it to fruition, sometimes the opportunity can be missed. And what we've done a lot in the insurance world is and we're refining our ideas all the time, because what we think people want, they don't want by the time and we've spent and wasted huge amounts of money and resources trying to bring it to fruition. So.
Yeah. And that's what I've always loved about working with the London market is their capability to be adaptable and adaptable quickly too.
Yeah.
You know, in the domestic markets, you've got to run things through state commissioners of insurance, and that's good and it has its purpose, but it does mean that the pace of innovation can be a little bit slower than it can be in the London markets. So
yeah, definitely credit to the London market. In fact, when I first came to London, so by background, I've always been an entrepreneur. I worked in e-commerce and website development for about 9 years before transitioning to cyber insurance. I set up a cyber insurance brokerage, and that's probably only now, like maybe 10 years ago-ish, from my first transition. And back then, London, as it still is known today, was the specialty risk areas. And at the time, domestic markets, your side of the pond, were quite a long way behind on the types of coverages that the London market, some of the leading London markets and MJs had formed and created. So there was a real advantage for being a quick mover, which saw the London market really on board and come out with some of the leading early cyber insurance risk solutions that gained such good traction. Now the domestic markets, your side, has certainly up their game, and it's a complete parallel, I think. And now it's a very soft market. There's so much capacity out there, and it's something that I wanted to touch on during our conversation today, because it's such a buyer's market. I mean, you can get, as an insured,
you just call your shot.
Oh, come on! Like you get such coverage. You get. I mean, it's challenging, I think, from a broker standpoint, because there's no specimen form, so a lot of the forms are different, and that creates opportunity, but it also creates, you really do have to know your apples when it comes to the carriers that you're bringing forward for your solution for your particular client. But it's it really is a very good time to buy cyber insurance from the end user. It's I think in the current situation with remote workers, obviously we're all in lockdown, hence you're in your basement and not in a flash office at the moment doing this recording. It just shows you that, digital risk, I think, after this lockdown, after the COVID-19, is still going to be very high on the radar of business owners who maybe hadn't considered it before. That could transition us quite well, because the reason that we've brought you on the first kind of recording podcast session today is to do a deep dive into something that I'm very interested in. We see huge amounts of activity in and around this particular item of ransomware. We know it's come a very long way from the 30 years or roundabouts to which we first saw our first strain of ransomware. And it's mitigated in some part through a cyber insurance policy. Well, in fact, it is completely mitigated. But I'm very interested to hear more, really, from your standpoint, just a bit of background about where you are, your day-to-day sort of role within ransomware, and kind of what it looks like in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is, pardon me. So I'm with the firm Tetra Defense. We're based out of Madison, Wisconsin, which for our international listeners is about 2.5 hours northwest of Chicago, straight in the Midwest of the United States. And Tetra Defense, it really has two main buckets of what we do. The first side is our proactive information security risk consulting. And then the other side is our cyber incident response. And most of that work, I'd say greater than 95% of that work comes from the cyber insurance industry. So we're, to a certain degree, at the mercy of the types of risks that the cyber insurance industry has chosen to take on, chosen to insure.
Right.
And right now, I would say better than 85-90% of the cases we're seeing are ransomware cases. And that's a bit of a shift from where we were a couple of years back. A couple of years back, it was more kind of straight forensics work, business email and compromise investigations, internal employee theft of data, or, employees stealing information from the business, that kind of thing. And that's really, since about January, February of 2019, has just completely shifted to just straight ransomware all day, every day. That's really what's powering most of the investigations that we're doing right now.
That's crazy. I mean, we're definitely, so as an underwriting agency, it's certainly up there in our top 3 most active claim events. And I think it's really ramped up. We used to like you say, lost stolen data was the main driver, mishandled data, but now certainly ransomware has just gone through the roof. And I think we were speaking with some of our threat intelligence people last week, and they were saying particularly that because of the COVID-19 and the lockdown, they're actually seeing a spike in assets that they're tracking. Can you just give some sort of holistic view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That lines up perfectly with what we're seeing. I don't think it's any accident that since our company has been around, the last probably 4 to 5 weeks have been the busiest weeks our company has ever seen. And just in terms of incoming case volume from our cyber insurance partners. So the way that these two are connected is, you think about how a ransomware threat actor gains access to your system. And I think when I've talked to people outside of cyber insurance, outside of cyber risk, and even people within, frankly, they have this idea that ransomware is just this really sort of exotic kind of hack. It's this really, intricate, totally set apart type of way that they access the system. And it's really not. Ransomware is just a different end to a conventional hack. It's a conventional hack with a different payload at the very end. So the same tools that they're using to do all the other nefarious things that they're doing, those are the tools they're using for this, and then they just drop a different cherry on top of the sundae once they've done their work. So the way that these are connected, the COVID and the remote work risk and what we're dealing with now, is one of the very most common ways that we see threat actors gain access to a system is through unsecured remote desktop sessions. So when I say a remote desktop session, I don't necessarily mean you have your own work laptop and you take it home. You're still sort of within your work's environment at that point, because you're working with a work system, and they can keep track of, are things patched on that system? Is anti-malware up to date using proper definitions on that system?
Yeah.
Where you're running into issues is, if a company before COVID had never thought about, how do we send 100 workers at home? How do we send 100 workers home to access their work computers from their home computers, from their personal devices? What they probably would have done is just stood up Windows RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol.
Sure.
And that's essentially a tool within Windows that allows you to access your work device from your personal device. Now, where that really becomes a risk is, now you've created a door into your environment, and the other side of that door is a world that you know nothing about. You have no idea if your employee's personal computer has anti-malware updates on it. You have no idea if their password is just their cat's name 123. So you have no idea what the security standards are on that personal device. If recent history tells us anything, most of those security standards are non-existent,
right.
Or if they're there, they're really low. So if somebody's lingering on that personal device, and all of a sudden this little light blinks on saying, hey, you get a remote access to your work computer, well, if I'm a hacker, my day's just been made. So in that case, they're going to be accessing those work networks from the home networks through these remote desktop sessions,
which have now gone through the roof. Obviously, as you're saying, I mean, I don't think, probably I might be wrong, but certainly in the history of computing, I'd be very shocked if we've seen so many remote workers within, certainly if you look across North America or probably the globe,
Yeah.
So
And certainly not within the small time frame that we've dealt with
yeah,
too.
yeah,
There's a meme floating around LinkedIn that's talking about, what, check the box. What's the thing that caused your digital transformation of the company? The CEO, the CFO, COVID-19.
yeah,
Like that the reality is that for the companies
yeah,
that haven't done this yet,
yeah,
they've had to do it now,
yeah.
and they've had to do it hastily and under pressure. And IT employees are just like any other employee. When they're under pressure, when they're being forced to do a lot more work than they normally would, mistakes are going to get made.
Yeah.
And when mistakes get made, that's when a hacker is going to capitalize on that.
I mean, that's such a scary landscape for any business owner to sort of deal with. Um, I mean, that is a crazy landscape. And I think what you touched on there is very important for anyone listening to this that feels that it's a very complicated set of circumstances that brings about a sophisticated ransomware event. I mean, I remember when we were dealing with the denial of service attacks that were very prevalent, that now are less prevalent. And really, there's a toolkit that you can download that has a very point here, click, shoot. It has actually a name that's linked to a very old game, PC game,
Yeah.
and it's scarily easy. So and I think it's no surprise that people are moving organized criminals from the type of, I mean, more risky to low risk, because I think they can do it so easily from territories which are very hard for law enforcement and regulatory bodies to try and go in and intervene. So in 2020, what are the typical, as of today, is it all COVID-19 that typically is the majority of the events that you're being brought in to manage?
Well, as we look at the total year of 2020, I would anticipate that in terms of any other societal event, this one probably will lead to the greatest proportion of cases that we work.
That's great.
But I think what's important to remember now is that while we are seeing a strong uptick in incoming cases due to COVID-19, ransomware itself has changed enough over the past year or two that what we're seeing right now, the seeds of the attacks we're seeing right now might have been planted 6 months ago, might have been planted 3 or 4 months ago.
When you say planted, David, where are they planted?
Yeah.
Do you mean planted on the personal device?
Yeah. So what I mean is that if we look at what ransomware was in, say, 2016, 2017, it was much more of a scattershot approach where hackers send out 10,000 emails. They hope that 10 people click on the thing, get encrypted, and then they just start encrypting everything as quickly as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And then, so that really forces the person to deal with the problem right away. And then they pay a ransom payment of $3,000 or something, and away they go. That's hackers are moving away from that as a model. That's still happening in some sectors, but by and large, the way that hackers are really moving is a much more methodical approach to how they're compromising a network. So what that essentially means is that, and to get back to your question about what I mean by planting, the root compromise of a lot of the attacks we're seeing now, that compromise might have taken place around Christmas time, might have taken place around mid-January or something like that, because what a hacker likes to do is once they've compromised your network, they've figured out that they can ask for, I say ask as in they're so polite, they figure out they can demand a higher ransom amount.
Yes.
If they are able to really just kneecap this company and hit it where it really hurts. If you're doing the scattershot approach and you're just encrypting the very first thing that malware sees, you have no idea how critical that is to the company, though. But if you are taking time to compromise the network and then spend a couple of months doing some reconnaissance within the network, you can find where our VP of Cyber Risk Management likes to say, you can find where the soft, chewy center of that company is.
Yeah.
And then you can absolutely hit them where it hurts them, because you've taken out the systems that generate their most revenue. You can hit them with the crown jewels of the data that they've got. And once you hit them there, then instead of this being a nuisance issue, this has become an existential crisis issue.
Oh, totally. Yeah, completely.
At that point, you can then say, you know what, I'm not going to ask for 3,000. I'm going to ask for maybe 300,000.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we're seeing drive the increase in ransom demands we're seeing today too. Right now, the average ransom payment is right around 111,000. A group, Coveware, that you may or may not be familiar with, probably are.
Yeah.
They put out a study recently. The average payment, which is different than demand, the average payment is about 111,000. If they were to do that study 3 years ago, I'd say the average payment probably is closer to 8 to 9, maybe.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and then probably 10 years ago, it was close to sort of hundreds. And
200,
before that,
300, yeah.
like individuals, it was like, give me $25 and I'll unencrypt your device or your machine.
Yeah, one of the first types of encrypting malware was Reviton, and that was the ransom notes were a little different on that particular strain. That was back in, I believe, 2011, 2012. The ransomware would lock up your system, and then there would be a fake notice from law enforcement saying,
Yeah, I remember.
we found unlicensed software, we found child pornography.
Yeah.
You have to pay a fine to unlock your computer, and they were asking for around $200 then.
Yeah.
So, and that was less than 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's such a move, isn't it, in scale that is now getting like it's continuing to scale. We're not seeing this go away because it's such an effective mechanism. And we, as when we're looking to ensure and look at companies now, we spend a lot of time looking at backup procedures, redundancy plans in the event that this does happen. Like, how can you drop the data, clear the servers? Like what is your plans if this happens? One thing that is interesting as well is that going back 10, 15 years, hacking as a whole was always to be loud. Like we used to, when we were still developing websites and we were transitioning when I was transitioning to the cyber insurance world, SQL injection was the most common type of hack that we would see, and it was simply more than just dumping lots amount of code into a website that really just made it not function and not work. It was more like we found a soft spot, whereas digital crime has gone full circle, where it's not denial of service, it's not necessarily disruptive. Once they get through your first layer of your security, they want to sit there undetected, very quietly, watching, and we're saying, not necessarily linked to ransom, but certainly we're seeing a lot of invoice manipulations following that same trend, that once they move into a network, they sit there doing everything they can not to be spotted and just watching. And then, as you say, looking for the chewy bit or the soft center to where they, who does what are the patterns of transfer. And I think once they understand the patterns of a business, either where the data resides, how that's handled, or where money flows, that's where we're seeing the hackers really digging in their teeth.
Well, I'll give you an example of this is a case that we worked probably, I think it was July or August, or it was August of last year, excuse me. It was for a university that got hit with ransomware. And on the same day that ransomware was deployed, the information security officer for the university, a couple of his family members were involved in just a real nasty car accident. And there's email traffic going back and forth across the network saying, hey, this is, families in this accident, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if we go back to that case, I'm not in the investigative team. I couldn't say whether or not the hacker triggered the ransomware attack because he saw this linchpin person have to leave the office to care for family. That may or may not have happened in that case, but it absolutely is well within the realm of possibility that the hacker, had they seen this linchpin have to leave the office, choose that moment to deploy the ransomware. So again, I'm not saying that that's what's happened here, but the more that I read the ransom notes that these hackers are putting out, and the more that I talk to our investigative team, you have to remember that these are just truly awful people in every conceivable way. And it's absolutely within the realm of possibility that they saw this person whose family members in the hospital choose their moment to say, now we're going to launch this attack, because the person who would have quarterbacked the whole incident response is incommunicado.
And I think that also rings true with the types of people that, in the very difficult circumstance the world's finding its place in complete lockdown, in complete turmoil, with thousands of deaths globally, that instead of dialing down, they've dialed up to try and capitalize on this awful situation for their
Yeah.
sort of gain. And I think that, as you say, that just brings alight the type of people that are involved in this sort of activity. One thing that I think would be super useful
Yeah.
for anyone that's listening is to just break down typically how a ransomware not necessarily happens, but how it comes to light. Naturally, the encryption is probably the first event that they will be made aware that something's happened. What are
Sure.
the steps after that? Kind of what are the typical things that they should expect to happen if they've become a victim of a ransomware incident?
Yeah, great question. So that is going to, it's going to depend on a couple of things. It's going to depend on what sort of information security systems the company's had in place to detect what's going on. And it's going to depend on the quality and the skill of the person who compromised that network.
Sure.
So if you have a hacker that comes in that's just a bull in a china shop and hasn't quite figured out how to be a little bit more stealthy, you'll see indicators of compromise all over the place. You'll see files getting switched. You'll see the suffix at the end of policy or at the end of files getting changed, and that's one clue that can tell you that, hey, something's up here.
Yeah. So by
So
that, just to be
yeah,
clear, you mean like
yeah,
Word doc to a PDF or
yep.
CSV for Excel, kind of like movement in document files?
Correct. Yeah, that is one of the ways that hackers, or once they've encrypted the file, the suffix at the end of it oftentimes gets changed. So that's, if you're seeing things that normally are, docx for a Word doc, and all of a sudden that's something different. That's one way that you might know that something's up.
Sure.
Like you said, if you double click on the file and you get the ransom note, that's going to be one thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
One way that a way that this is often discovered kind of when it's really right in your face is when you look at your desktop and normally you have all your files and folders there. Each one of those is going to have a different sort of icon and a different sort of suffix at the end. And then there'll be a new Word document that you didn't create there. And that Word document is going to usually have a name that says ransom note or something along those lines. So you actually see that they'll leave the note for you right on your desktop just so that they make sure that you find it. And they're so kind in that they say, oftentimes if you need customer support, if you need help securing Bitcoin, if you have questions about how this works, they'll give you a 1-800 number to call, or they give you an email address for you to ask questions. They're
Isn't that
very thoughtful that way.
staggering? Yeah.
Yeah.
We hear more and more that it's more of a, certainly with our experience, that it's an open conversation with the person that's
Mhm.
applied the ransom and the encryption
Yeah.
on what kind of strain it is, how do we get through it, like what
Mhm.
are the steps. I mean, it like you say, it's very formalized. I think people have a misconception on just how blasé this process is.
Yeah. I think that the majority of ransomware that we see is very formalized on the back end, like you're getting at, where, if we're in the middle of a negotiation with a hacker, we've had instances where we've sent, they ask for X, we offer Y, and they go back and it's like you're buying a used car and they'll say, I just need to run that number past my manager. I'll be right back. And it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess you don't really know that they're doing that because they're wherever they are in the world, but
Mm.
these are formalized operations. And I think I think what needs to be noted though is that most of the attacks that are hitting businesses are these formalized operations. But if you or I decided that we wanted to go and be rogue criminals, you or I, with the technical level of knowledge that we've got, could go online, go on YouTube, figure out how to download a dark web browser,
Yeah.
then figure out how to use that dark web browser on a YouTube video, figure out how to buy ransomware and deploy it using the knowledge that we have now.
Yeah.
There was the Advisen Cyber Risk Insights Conference in Chicago in 2017. The keynote speaker was the Chief Information Security Officer for Experian. Obviously, they've got just a mountain of security that they need to keep working because they've got probably they're one of the top 3 data brokers around.
Yes.
And what the point that he really tried to stress there is that he was talking to a room of cyber risk insurance professionals. He said, you really need to understand just how low the barrier to entry is for somebody that wants to do you great harm.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, if you're going to be a ransomware threat actor, you don't even know how to code anymore. You don't even
Yeah.
know how, you don't have to know how to use a PowerShell, the black screen, white text interface. You can go on for $30. You can go to the dark web, buy a ransomware packet, and start delivering it where you want it to go with a point and click interface with just a Windows screen.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be this mastermind hacker to do this anymore. The best ones usually are.
Yeah.
But if you want to make somebody's life miserable, you can do that. Most of the people listening can do that with the knowledge that they've got right now.
Yeah,
I
it's very
encourage you
much
not
gone
to.
into and I think that's probably true of technology as a whole, that
Mhm.
everything has become plug and play. Building websites, e-commerce solutions has all moved into an open source, open forum dialogue. What used to be very difficult, like what we're doing now,
Yeah.
laptop, webcam, mic, is completely easy to do. And I think you're right that certainly if people want to go that road, it's incredibly easy with the information that's out there at a very low cost.
Mhm.
And that's probably, the organized crime has really took hold of this, because, and also you're getting paid in a cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
usually if there is a settlement. So it's tremendously easy for people to sort of go back into the fog and get lost. So
Yeah.
I guess a couple of things on, can it be stopped?
Here's
Million
the
dollar
analogy
question.
here's the analogy that I use. If you are say I'm a car manufacturer, when I design my car, I've got my gas pedal and I've got my brake pedal. We're going to assume it's an automatic, not a stick shift. When I design that car, I design the brake pedal to always be stronger than the gas pedal, because if I jam both pedals to the floor, I don't want that car to move. So brakes always beats gas. What's important to remember about any information security risk, and ransomware is really no different here, is that a concerted hacker who really desperately wants to get into your system, given enough time and enough resources, will find a way in. Now, most of us don't have that big of a target on our backs. Most of us aren't these gigantic international data brokers that everybody wants to hack into.
Yeah.
So our goal should not be to think that we built a perfectly secure environment, because that doesn't exist. Our goal should be to build an environment that's resilient enough to face one of these attacks if it happens, and ultimately make the act of hacking us frustrating enough to that hacker that they say, you know what, this just isn't worth the payday for me. I'm going to go find, there's a billion other businesses out there. I'm just going to go find somebody that's easier to hack. And
Makes sense.
there's always going to be somebody easier to hack somewhere else.
That makes
So
a lot of sense. So you're really saying that the answer, can it be stopped, is most likely not.
mhm,
But can you make it very difficult or more difficult, in the similar way that banks over the years went from having saloon doors to metal doors to alarms to bars on windows to
bingo.
lasers, so I get, that's a good analogy. I think it's a very good way for people listening to this, depending on whether they're in insurance, whether they're in the cyber world, the security
Mhm,
world, or whether they're running businesses, to think about that. And it's something we do promote and something that we do look for, and that does
yeah,
affect our thoughts around this topic, whether you're
yeah,
high risk, low risk, because what happens typically when a ransom takes place is, our biggest concern is less, it's twofold really. Is one is data restoration.
mhm,
So depending on backup frequencies, how does that look? And the other one, probably the most prevalent, is the business interruption aspect of it,
yeah,
depending on the company. And that's something that we think about and look at in a great deal, because because the disruption nature of this, the time that it takes, and that's where they hold the leverage. Because if
yeah,
you're not ready for an event, and your business interruption or your ability to trade is zero, and you have no continuity plans, then your panic is, it's quicker to resolve it by trying to settle the ransom, which is
yeah,
never the right. I mean, we certainly look for unencryption. We certainly look for methods of, as I say, sort of cleaning, starting again as a
yeah.
restoration piece. Then definitely, we certainly don't. I think that it would be I think it's not the right approach to just sort of knee jerk into settling
Yeah.
ransoms.
And I think that deserves to be repeated. No, nobody likes paying a ransom.
Yeah.
Like nobody feels good when it happens.
Yeah.
But I think there's this misconception out there that people have that once I get hit with the ransomware, that I all of a sudden have this choice about whether or not I'm going to pay or not pay.
Mm.
That choice isn't made when you get hit with the ransom. That choice is made by the decisions that you've made, not made, by the tools you've invested or not invested in the months and years before the attack.
Love
Because
that.
the options that you have once the ransomware hits are the options you've given yourself with your decisions prior. So an example is, we've talked about backups a couple of times.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, you've got backups, but okay, well, let's dig into that. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Are your backups just, it's something's backing up to the cloud? Okay, well, that's great. Is that what's backing up to the cloud secured with multi-factor authentication? If
Mm.
it's not, then I'm going to consider that next to useless.
Yeah.
So do you have backups that are air gapped, meaning that you take a physical tape, an image of your network, and you put it off site somewhere? Okay,
Mhm.
well, that if you've done that, okay, that's good. How often are you doing that? And have you tested any of those tapes to make sure they actually work? A backup plan that's not tested, again, I'm not going to count that for anything, because so often we see a company that says, oh yeah, we got backups, it's not a problem. And then we actually check the tape backup and they haven't tested it in 6 months. So yeah, you can back up, but you're going to lose the last 6 months worth of business. So really, what good is that you?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is that?
Totally.
What good does that do you? And then the other piece is, yeah, even if you've got all these things in place, what's your recovery time objective? If it's going to take you 6, 7, 8, 9 days, even a couple of weeks to restore from backups, even if you have backups, is that functional for your business? What's going to happen to your business if you can't do business for 2 weeks while you restore from these backups?
Mm.
What's that going to mean to your bottom line? What's that going to mean to your reputation?
Totally.
So if you've done all these things and you've done them the way that they should be done, then you've given yourself a real option when the encryption starts, that waterfall starts happening on your system. Then you
Mm.
can stand there with 2 feet in the ground and say, no, I'm not going to pay. But if you haven't done those things, then your option isn't pay or not pay. Your option is pay or go out of business.
Yeah.
And then who's going to choose option B?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you haven't, like you say, like you have zero choice in that situation.
Yeah.
You're in a rock and an extremely hard place, and there's only
Yeah.
one option out. What's pretty cool, I think, that we haven't touched on is, and not, I didn't want to turn this into a podcast about necessarily about cyber insurance or how great cyber insurance is, even though I think
I mean,
it
it
is.
is.
Like, it's like in the event of ransomware, like if you don't have a cyber insurance policy, like who do you call? One of the, I think the coolest things that we build our policy on, and a lot of our peers and competitors do also, is the ability to respond.
Yeah.
Now we have a list of, you included in this list, of people in particular sectors of cyber insurance or cyber risk,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly if we think about ransomware, because that's what we're talking about in this podcast topic, that you have pre-arranged services of someone to turn to when this happens, in addition to your other sort of plannings and procedures that you have in place. And I think it's that instant response team is one of the biggest things that I think people should consider
Oh yeah.
cyber insurance policy for. It just gives you such a Navy SEAL or a British SAS kind of response team that can come, boom, like quick as you like, to come and get involved and mitigate and best handle this procedure. Because how many, and you don't have to answer this, but roughly or percentage wise, like how many do you see events are you managing week, quarter, month? Like a good number.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're seeing, I mean, if we're talking over the course of a year, we're seeing hundreds.
Right.
If we're talking over the course of any given month, that can ebb and flow, but it's in the dozens.
And that's what I mean. In these type of circumstances, you need somebody that lives, dies, loves ransomware, and is experienced enough. Like we look to you guys in this type of situation. I mean, we very much bake that in, because we look for people that solely do this day in, day out. Because the good and the bad of digital risk as well is it's moving, as we've touched on this conversation today, that over 30 years, but even over 5 years, over 3 years, like what's it going to be like in the next 5 years?
Well, I think when we look forward there, I was thinking about this last night, and in order for in order for something to change in this conversation, we're almost waiting for sort of a Deus ex machina moment, just some fundamental paradigm shift in either some aspect of insurance, some aspect of cybersecurity, or a come to Jesus moment with the hackers. I'm not counting on that last one, but it could happen, I guess. Probably not. But, so something like that, what's really fueled, one of the things that's fueled the rise in ransomware really over the past couple of years is the fact that more and more business owners are making these payments. And the reason that they're doing it is because they're feeling increased pressure to do so. And that pressure is coming from the fact that we've transitioned so much of our lives and so much of our businesses into an online connected
Oh,
world.
yeah. You mean like from non-digital to digitally enabled? Yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah, I talk about that a lot.
It's not like it's 10 years ago where there may have been 40% of our aspect of the business that wasn't online. Now it's most of it, unless you're a construction company or a manufacturer, where you're doing kind of hard.
And you don't have a choice. Like, it's the way commerce, it's the way communication is done now. You can't open a bank without an email address.
Yeah.
Everything's done to your smart device. Everything's app-based. It's
exactly
the way of the world.
Since we've put so many eggs in the digital basket, which has certainly benefited the world, it's benefited economies, it's benefited those in poverty. Like, yeah, we should have done that. That was the right thing to do.
Right, like way more good than bad is definitely what we should be taking from this.
Definitely, but that comes with inherent risk, and that's what we're seeing here now. So, as the digital transformation has ramped up, the security transformation has not kept pace. There's a lot of reasons for that, because security slows things down. Security, there's always this delicate balance between access and security. Everybody wants ease of access, but the easier you make access, the easier you make it for hackers to access your systems too. So security can slow things down, which again is probably good in a lot of cases, but because it can slow things down, it's sometimes left on a back burner. So you've got all these digital transformed systems that aren't maybe as secure as they could be. And you look at I think worldwide, the most recent figure I've seen is there's some 3 million open information security positions worldwide. So there's a lack of people that know how to secure these systems too. One of the biggest eye-opening things that I've seen over the past probably 3 or 4 years is, if you were to ask me 5 years ago to talk about IT disciplines, I would have just kind of told you they're all kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, they're all computers. But that's obviously not the case. I mean, network engineers versus developers versus information security consultants versus forensics investigators, they're all doing wildly different things.
Oh, yeah. That's part of that's part of the challenge, isn't it? That there's just so many facets and layers to it. And to touch on your point earlier, and I think it's right that digital innovation should never be led with cybersecurity, maybe at the forefront of the innovation, because that would naturally slow it down. But then there is always that gap of catch up and gap of exploitation. And we're not that far into it. If we look at the timelines of industry, the revolutions that we go through from computer now into the interconnected computer world, it's a very, as you said, it's a very layered, diverse landscape that by default then brings certain holes that will be exploited. And I don't think that's ever going to slow down. I think that's the way of the world we're in.
I think if we're talking in terms of decades and not in terms of individual years, I think we can get to a point where this is less and less of an issue. And the example that I've got comes, think of it, we're talking about the digital industrial revolution where we're at right now. We're 20 years into that whole experiment, 25 years into that whole experiment. So we're basically London in about 1890 right now.
That's crazy. I love it when you think like that. So it's madness, isn't it?
So I mean, that's where we're at right now. And the issue they were dealing with back then was the issue of the innovation and increases in manufacturing and safety of factories, which were not safe at all. But
Yeah.
the argument back then probably would have said, well, safety slows things down. And yes, it does. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it was determined to be a societal good.
Yeah.
So we put structures in place to support that.
Yeah.
I think over time, as the societal knowledge of cybersecurity increases, and it will increase,
Of course.
as it increases, I think it's going to be taken more seriously across the board. And I think the sort of the tectonic shift will happen over the decades, and it will be a more
So
secure
maybe
world.
what you're saying is like this gap will close over 50 versus 5.
Yes, that's
Right.
exactly it. That's big. Yeah, this isn't going to be a 5-year problem.
Right.
This is a 50-year problem. But I think over time it'll just make it will close, because you're right. I mean, right now you've got, to kind of go back to that piece about the IT professionals. You've got executives that just think that, oh, well, you're the IT guy. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? There's 100 different disciplines there, and only
Yeah.
one of them specializes in information
Yeah.
security. Security
Yeah,
doesn't.
I think you're right. I think that role now has gone from being very hands-on to maybe the IT guy is more of an IT sort of triaging person
Yeah.
that has some internal resources, tons of external resources, and that both does bring more complexities and also issues, and a bigger picture issues as well with some security. We see a lot of security issues arising from third parties that the insured's IT person has outsourced a certain role or activity to,
Yeah.
which is natural for innovation, as nobody has racks of servers in their businesses. Only 10 years ago, there was racks of services. I mean, hardware was gold at that point. Now hardware is trash.
Yeah. Hardware is, the moment you buy it, it's going out of date. So just let Amazon keep that up.
Yeah. It's data, not hardware. And that's 10 years. So I think the only thing that I think will play a factor is a bit of a bigger factor, is that if we move into the next realm of data or storage or computing, whether the landscape to which we know it in as today, as in the World Wide Web, electronic mail, the good and the bad about, I think, digital risk is that it has the ability to move without physics. So regardless of a boat, if we took a boat as an example, boats today still float like boats did 300 years ago, since they started floating, or way probably 3,000 years ago. Like, there are laws of physics. There's certain physics that say this is what causes a boat to float. I think when it comes to digital innovation, there are certain rules, but those rules are always changing. So I think that maybe ransom, as we know it today, will be very different by predication, because the way we interact, the way we communicate, the way that the world works, as a bit like as your analogy was with London, how everything ran off coal. Now there's no coal in London. Children in factories, there's no factories in London anymore, because manual labor is obsolete. It's all outsourced or made differently under machinery. So I think that over the next 5 to 10 to 50 years will have a huge impact on. I'm sure they will be talking about, can you remember when people used email and they would get ransomware and it was so easy, and now they just put their finger on their temple and they telepathically, electronically, you'll see, you know what I mean? I think I just think that landscape, I think the landscape that we're working in today, certainly after 5 or 10 years, is going to be very different as it has been before. And maybe that brings about a different layer. But I'm sure there'll always be bad guys and girls that are out there trying to make a dime, a dollar, or a Bitcoin off.
Oh yeah, we won't be talking about ransomware in 40 years. We'll be doing another podcast when we're old and gray about it, but it'll just be a different problem. That's all.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what it's all about. It's about closing the gaps, and then so really what we're saying is they're very opportunistic people. So they'll jump onto the opportunities that arise, and the second that starts to, nobody robs trains anymore because it's difficult. There's no money on training. How do you move it around? This in a similar analogy, as this starts to become more difficult, more challenging, more risky, more likely to get them in prison, they'll move into something else that is the next.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's an accident that in the United States, when our Right around the time that we saw ransomware really start to pick up steam was right around the time that nationwide the mandate for the chip on your credit and debit cards. We didn't have those in the States
Yeah,
till
I remember.
3 years ago, 4 years
Yeah,
ago,
that's
and in
crazy.
Europe they've been around forever.
Yeah.
But here it wasn't a nationwide thing until about 3 or 4 years ago, and that's what we really saw was this decline in credit and debit card theft because it was harder to do.
Sure. Yeah.
So the next best thing was ransomware because you could do it remotely. You didn't have to attach a skimmer to an ATM machine or something like that. So
Yeah.
it was the next opportunity when the previous easy buck became hard to capitalize on.
That is such an interesting fact.
Yeah.
They would just, as you say, would just reiterate kind of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's what we've seen over just the past few years.
Awesome.
So, and I'm no security researcher. That's just purely anecdotal. But
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I'm sure you're right. We definitely like looking at trends, and hopefully by people sort of understanding ransomware a little bit more, understanding what it does, how they can do it, taking some of the steps, and just really being more aware of it, and pre-planning is a big part of what they need to do.
yes.
If they've got an insurance policy, check that it covers it. Typically, a cyber policy would, and understanding where that fits into that sort of catch-all sort of plan. Because clearly, what we've learned today is that it's a big issue. It's getting worse. It's getting more active. It's so easy for anybody to actually perform one of these sort of attacks.
Yeah.
All right, David, look, this has been great. I think we're just coming up to the clock here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's super early your end, and I wish you well in
coffee. We're good.
Yeah. Have some more coffee, and we'll speak to you again, I'm sure, very soon.
Looking forward to it already, Neil.